Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of From the Mount, a podcast from the campus of Mount Paran Christian School. I'm your host, Steve Kyle. Thank you for joining us for another episode. And this is going to be a good one. There's some firsts in this episode that I'm really excited about. If you've read the description already, you saw that it's about missions. You saw that we have a student guest. And kind of a semi-newish co-host, at least for this episode. So I'm really excited about it. So we have two new people to the podcast. If you're a regular listener, there's no doubt you, one person, if you're a longtime Mount Paran person, you're going to know maybe one of the co-host. But I have in the studio with me Jean-Ann Murphy. Jean-Ann, welcome.
Thanks.
Yeah, traditionally you say thank you when people welcome you. But glad to have, and you'll hear more about why she's on this great episode and while she'll be on some future episodes as well. But the super exciting thing is Sarah Neal, one of our seniors, is here in the studio with us. Sarah Neal, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, that it sounded genuine, like you're excited to be here, but glad to have you here and there's lots of reasons why I chose you to be here. We're, of course, talking about missions. We're going to be talking and kind of reflecting on a recent missions trip we've taken. But then, and anybody who was ever at the time, I had you share one time in a chapel experience here. And for those that may not know, I oversee all that here at Mount Paran as well. She basically preached a really great message.
She did. We didn't need you after she.
Yeah, we really didn't, but she did a great job. And so when I thought about who can I get to bring on that could really probably share with some genuineness and who was a part of this trip, you were the lone person I asked. So I'm glad you said that you would come in.
Of course.
But first off, before we're going to meet you, we're talking about missions today. We're going to be talking, there's a lot we could talk about. If you've listened, we've had other guests on where we've talked a little bit about the importance of missions, but this is a really specific one because it deals with, a trip we've actually taken, and what our philosophy and how we look at missions. And so, Jean-Ann, that's one of the main reasons you're on this episode is you serve, obviously, as the Assistant Director of Christian Life here, and one of your primary roles is going to be is missions and kind of overseeing that part of what we do here. And so, first of all, for those that may not know who you are, you can, of course, talk a little bit about who's Jean-Ann and why would he pick her to do missions. So go ahead.
Well, thank you, Steve. I am the Assistant Director of Christian Life here, and I do get the privilege of planning mission trips for our students. Missions are really close to my heart. Before I worked at Mount Paran, I worked for an organization that planned mission trips. And so it's something I've been doing for a long time. I believe that it's something that we do out of obedience. I believe that it's a calling. And so to get to do that with our students here has been just an incredible privilege and a blessing.
Yeah, and it's something I know you're passionate about. You've traveled a lot on these trips, and you understand the value in it. And so when we look at missions, and I know there's lots of people that might be listening who view missions differently. They're gonna look at it and consider the reason and purpose behind it. And Sarah Neal, we're going to get to you in just a second. Lots of different philosophies about missions. We, of course, at Mount Paran have our own kind of, and again, not unique to us, philosophy. But our focus on missions, and there's lots of different ones. How would you kind of encapsulate what you would say, in kind of in your own words, Mount Paran's missional focus is, the reason we do missions, outside of the fact we're commanded to do them? What's our motivation and our purpose?
So oftentimes people think that the mission trip is about the 1 week that you're actually serving on the mission, but that is not exactly our philosophy here. Of course, when we go on a mission trip, it is about providing material and spiritual blessing to those that we're going to serve. So I don't want to undermine that in any way. However, our hope is that students are transformed often, many times, most of the time. When I take students on trips, I see that they are changed in some way, and that they have a heart transformation that brings them home, and then they're able to serve in their own communities, or they feel a calling towards mission, or they feel more comfortable sharing their testimony. It's about transformation and growth for our students outside of the 1 week that they're just serving.
Yeah. And it's not that you mentioned it. We can't go and do great stuff like we did recently in the Dominican Republic, but you wonder how many, times has this village been visited, or how many times, have they heard the gospel? It's great, but boy, if that change can transform in the heart of a student we take, boy, that could impact in so many ways. So so great. So Sarah Neal, I'm gonna move to you as we. So recently we took one of our trips. We're planning. We'll talk a little bit more about that later in the podcast. But we took one of our trips to the Dominican Republic, of which we had the privilege of having you on the trip. You had the opportunity to go on the trip, and I think you had a great time.
Yes,
I hope so, because I had you here.
It was amazing.
Yeah. So real quick but for people that might be listening and they're like, well, I want to know, who is Sarah Neal? Like, who is this girl that went on this trip? If you would, just because I know when I listen, I'm like, oh, who's that voice? And can I relate to that voice? And so I might be a parent, I might be a student, an elementary student parent. Who is Sarah Neal? Like, give us a quick, your time at Mount Perrin. What do you love to do? What are things you're involved in? All that stuff.
Yeah, no. I started at Mount Perrin when I was in 9th grade, so I've been here for 4 years. I've been a part of the Mount Perrin varsity competition team, track and field, and I've been involved with the leadership program here called Go Lead That you can do in high school. And just done a bunch of different things just around the high school, helping out in any way I can. Beta club, all those fun things.
All the fun things, yeah. And so with in cheerleading, you've got a few state championship rings.
Yes.
Yeah, only 4 every year you've been here. They've won, and I know you did track and field. I've got to be out there and watch you run track and. Now, were you on the team? Did the girls team win a state championship, or did only certain girls a couple years ago?
They won the year before I was a freshman, so it was right before me. We got second my freshman year. We were so close.
I knew, yeah, I know. Only runner up, and especially when you win so many other state championships, it's almost expected. Like, what is this second place? I'm not familiar with it. So, and of course, I remember I've been here much longer than you, and I remember when you came here to Mount. But we've actually joked about a little bit about. Maybe what you were like, who's this guy? And then I was like, who's this new girl? But so now fast forward senior year, we've brought back missions. Of course, you came at a time where COVID hit. And of course, that impacted missions across the board. So you didn't have very many opportunities to do this.
Yeah.
And it's something here at Mount Perrin, if you're listening to this episode and you see at least the date, we're obviously post-COVID now, and that, of course, had a big impact on. So here, this opportunity presented itself. We're traveling to the Dominican Republic. Why, you didn't have to go. Nobody made you go. Why'd you say, you know what, I'm going to go on this trip?
Yeah, I grew up with both my parents always going on missions. My mom went to Africa, and my dad went to Jamaica multiple times, and they both just would always preach about it, how amazing it was, and you see them preparing to go on these missions and all the things that they do, and we did too. And so when the opportunity presented itself this year about the Dominican and other future mission trips, I really did see that, and I was like, I really want to go on that, but I'm just not sure if that's where God has me or which one to choose. So honestly, I just kept devoting myself in prayer to it, just being okay, Lord, give me peace, if this is what I'm supposed to do. And it was kind of just one of those things that I was just why does it matter? I don't know anyone who's going on this trip. I don't know what we're going to be doing, but I just feel like I should go and I want to go, and this is my chance. I'm just going to step out of my comfort zone and go do it. And so I came to Miss Murphy's office. I didn't even fill out the form or anything. I was like, I want to go on this mission trip, and literally that day, she was like, oh, you have 2 more days left to sign up. And we called my dad, and, he got everything put down. So, I mean, it was just literally lined
I was
up
so
perfectly.
excited when you came to see me, and I had the best conversation with your dad. I was actually taking my dog for a walk, talking to him about this mission trip. But you have just such a sweetheart for service, and you were just an incredible blessing to our team.
Oh, thank you.
So, but you'd never been to the Dominican Republic, right?
No, I had not.
Yeah, it had never traveled international missions before.
No.
Yeah, for missions. So this all was going to be brand new. Now, of course,
Yes.
you're a senior, and so if you're listening while this is being recorded, she's a senior. So you'd never done this, and you're like, all right, I'm doing this. Like, I'm going to get on a plane with students, of course, you might know of, like I know their name or I've seen them in the hallway, but I don't know them. I don't know what country I'm going to. I don't know where I'm going to stay. I don't know anything about this. I just feel like, all right, God, this is where you want me to go. And that's kind of where it went, where it landed. Now, of course, a number of other people went on this trip. I think we have like 25, 30 of us total.
Yeah, it was a big group.
30 people.
Yeah, total, I think that went. Various reasons people went on the trip, though. Not everybody shared the same reason you went, right?
Yeah, no. Everyone, I feel like all had different reasons. You know, some people were like, oh, well, I've gone on them before. Some people were, oh, my friend's going. Or, you know, everyone had their own reason. But that was really, honestly, I really had no idea who was going to be on there. And then later I found out, oh, I have friends. So that made it better.
Yeah.
But, you know, it was just honestly just like a spur of the moment. I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do.
But you say that about friends. One thing that always happens on a mission trip is you make friends with people you would never be friends with.
100%. The connections that you build on these trips is like incredible. Literally to this day, I mean, it's been, I don't even know how long since we went on the mission trip. And every time you see them in the hallway, it's like, oh my gosh, hey. And the connection's just so much deeper than like a friendship. It's like y'all served together and y'all, you know, you did the good stuff.
Yeah, no, that's so true, and of course, those of us that get to go as adults, we experience the same thing with the students and getting to know people. But I think it's really important that if you're listening and you're wondering, again, you're a parent of a lower school, middle schooler, yet to maybe get to this place, you can make that decision. It's not even like there's a wrong reason to go. Like, well, what if they just want to go because their friends go? Great. You know, God can use that reason to get you to go on this trip, or it's because you've been before, or you like the trip, or you like the leaders, or your friends are going. In your case, it was like, man, I just was like, all right, God, this is where I'm going. So, great trip. Kind of give and maybe between the two of you two, a little bit about a basics, like this particular trip. You know, as you go, what were some of the ministry-related kind of things that we did, that we were a part of, maybe that stood out to you while we were there? Can you give an example or two?
Yeah, when we went to a few sugarcane villages and just like little churches within those villages or towns. And honestly, like you sometimes on mission trips, like you think, oh, I'm going to go build a house, or oh, I'm going to go, you know, preach the word to a whole bunch of people. But honestly, what like impacted me and stuck with me was just like the little connections you make with all like the kids that you go there, and just playing with them, giving them a hug and showing them love. And honestly, literally just showing them like what the love of Christ is literally the biggest thing to them. And it impacts you far more than you would ever like imagine it would. And it's just
she put
phenomenal.
that beautifully. Yeah, she can preach it.
Yeah.
We weren't there to build a house or dig a well, but we were there to share our testimonies and play with children and share the love of Christ. And I think often it's a great reminder for our students and for ourselves too, that just the love of Christ, it crosses boundaries, cultures, languages, races. So it's just an incredible experience in so many ways.
Yeah. It is. And every trip is going to vary. You know, if you take trips before and you're like, well, we dug a well, or we painted houses, or those are awesome. Those are great things. It obviously varies, and even on trips we'll take here in the future, they're going to vary what we do and how we do it. But most importantly, it's understanding that it isn't always like, it's not like, well, I didn't really have this special time where, I mean, there were powerful moments I remember from this particular trip in which just time spent where people begin to recognize these are followers of Christ, and the love they showed me, the time they spent with me, the things they did for me or gave me was impactful. And so, and it's not even hard. It's not like, again, if you're listening going, well, my kid's not handy with tools or they don't speak the language. Do you speak any Spanish, by the way?
No, I took French all of my years of high school, so I was going completely.
I'm in the same boat, French.
Yeah, I took Spanish one year, and it didn't help me at all. So that's the other thing, is you can go on these trips and go, I don't speak the language. Who cares?
Yeah, no, the language barrier, honestly, that's what we talked about so much, was it had like nothing on us. Like it was literally just straight God.
Yeah, it was. And God working in that. And so, again, I think that's such a, and I think, you know, Jean Ann, what she mentioned are things that, for the most part, what will characterize a lot of our trips will be more along the lines, not that we won't ever do those things, but it'll fall more along the lines of school, kind of orphanage type stuff.
And we try to plan activities based on the strengths of our students too. So if we have lots of, artsy kids, we can be doing jewelry making and different things. But I think a powerful thing that always happens is, we meet in preparation for these trips and we ask students to write their testimonies. And sometimes that's very intimidating for our students. But I find that is such a helpful exercise for myself and for students traveling, because oftentimes they're just so much more willing to share those testimonies when we're in these different cultures where they're not maybe in the U.S. standing around people they think they're going to run into again tomorrow. And once students have the opportunity to share their testimonies in these types of situations, they're sometimes able to do that when they get home a lot more easily, and they're so much more comfortable with that.
No, yeah, I agree with that for sure. Before we went on the trip and I was asked to write mine, I wanted to write an essay. You think it has to be this way.
Yeah.
And then when we were on the trip, Mr. Kyle was like, hey, you're going to share your testimony today. And I was like, oh, I am? And he's like, yeah, you're going to go up there. I was like, oh, okay. And literally, I didn't even say anything that I would write in a essay format, It's not about that. And honestly, that boosted my self-confidence and being able to share a testimony so much, like you just said, being able to come home and even say it. It's just...
And when we can tell people in our own communities how God is moving and working in us, man, what a transformation that is.
Yeah, it is. And it's your story. I mean, it's really you telling your story of what God has done in your life. And I think we overcomplicate it.
Yeah.
Or we're like, well, mine's not super exciting and dramatic. I wasn't saved after my 20 years in prison for, it isn't. It was like, no, I was just a normal kid. And I recognized my need for Christ. And I recognized it's more than just a, passport to heaven, but a transformation and life change. So it is. It's so that's a little bit about when you talk about our trips. And so we've heard now, Gina, and you shared a little bit about the fact that our focus on missions trips, although not that we ignore who we're going to serve, but the focus is on the transformation in the lives of the students we take. That's where we feel like the greatest impact. Sarah Neal, I'll go to you and say then, and again, I've not prepped you for any kind of, I don't have any idea what you're going to answer, or if you're going to even give me something where I'm going to later go, oh, come on, Sarah Neal, really? No, I'm not worried about that. I want to know, you went on this trip and, you spent a week. What was your take? What did God do as you reflect now on that trip and you look at, you're getting ready to graduate and head off into college. You're not called to be a missionary. You don't have to be, but what, if anything, did you take away from this trip where you're like, this is where my eyes were opened, transformation took place? How would you answer that?
Honestly, we would have devotions every night for a little background on the mission trip, and we just talked a lot about obedience being greater than sacrifice and what our idols are. And honestly, that has to this day stuck with me every single day. I look at myself and I'm like, what really am I idolizing in my life right now? And is it important, or is it greater than the Lord? And obviously nothing can be greater than God. And so I think just kind of reevaluating my own life and being like, okay, all these things I get so worked up about, they really mean nothing in the long term. And, being obedient to what Christ says my life is supposed to look like and is supposed to be, it's not something that, is supposed to put me in a box and restrict me so much, but it's honestly protecting me. And I feel like honestly in our generation, it's kind of hard to see that as a teenager. And so really just honing in on that myself and not it just being told to me, and forced upon me, but really devoting myself to that and reading the word and being okay, know that God really does love me so much, and that's why he wants to protect me from these things. And he says this is the way that I'm supposed to be obedient for a reason, not, just for fun or to whatever. It's all has a purpose. And so I think really just truly following that and being okay, look, all this other stuff isn't worth it. It's not going to make me feel better than this can. And I think really just trying to be Sarah Neal, you need to stay true to that and not let anything come back and be a bigger idol than, him is just really what I just try to have as my top priority and my idol, as I guess you could say.
That was beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, you see why I had her on here, and I didn't tell her to say any of that stuff. I didn't. It's interesting. You hear from students, you hear people, and you're like, okay, And we do. Over my 30 years of doing this, I've met lots of students over the years, and you're like, all right, if this is someone that they put Christ first, man, God's going to do amazing things. I think you're one of those students. He's going to do some great things. To hear that, especially, I mean, you're getting ready to go off to college where that isn't typically the top of anybody's list of making Christ, like when I go to college, that's going to be my priority. It's usually not, and certainly probably wasn't mine either a long time ago. So, Gina, anything I'm going to give you the last word here in just a second. Anything you wanted to add to that when you consider when our kids go on these trips, the responses we had a great one here from our students in what their eyes are open to or God reveals to them.
Yeah, it is a sacrifice to send your kid on a trip. We know that it costs money. It's time that you could be at the beach with your family. We sacrificed some hot showers while we were there. But I just think that what your student will gain in return, I just think that they can experience Christ in a way that we can't necessarily always experience him in our day-to-day lives. Sometimes we just have to remove ourselves and go somewhere different to see the way he's moving. And I don't think you'll ever regret sending your student on a trip because, as you heard from Sarah Neal, I just think there's so much growth spiritually that happens in ourselves while we are spiritually blessing others. And I just think it's so beautiful to see the way that Christ works that way through us.
Yeah.
For sure. All right. So, Sarah Neal, I'm going to kind of give you this last word here on this. I'm a parent listening. Maybe it's even a student listening. I have no idea. Maybe there's some kid. There's no better podcast than From the Mount. And so he's listening to us right now. He's like, I don't get enough of Mr. Kyle, Mrs. Murray. I want more. A parent, what would you say? I'm a parent, and I've got a middle schooler, and I'm like, oh, this would be really hard. Like, I don't know if I could let my child board a plane, or a student who's wondering, should I go? Should I not? Is it that? What advice would you give that parent, that family member, that whoever that might be listening that's deciding on this, all right, God, is missions a trip like this for me?
Yeah. And I mean, I know for sure my parents were definitely a little anxious about, sending me to the Dominican, on a mission trip for something that we didn't really know like awful a lot about, but honestly, they really solidified just like trusting God and themselves and in me and just being like, okay, it's all going to be okay. Like, this is all happening for a reason. And two, that when you send your kid, like Miss Murphy said, that we're going to, spread the word of the Lord and do all the good works. But not only do you do that, but you also have so much just like self-evaluation that just like washes away so many like different things that we, keep in the forefront of our mind in our day-to-day life. And, you really do come back transformed. So, as scary as it can be, doing all the new things and going on a mission trip and sending your kid, it really is worth it in the long run because you come back and it doesn't just like end that week, it really does keep going.
And I do want to add that while we're doing hard things on mission trips, we actually have a lot of fun.
We do, yes.
Yeah.
And amazing talks too, like at night and everything.
Great talks, great laughs. We were singing karaoke. we have so much fun while we're doing hard work.
Yes.
And so I just want to make sure everyone knows it's fun too.
Yes, no, it's far more than what you just think like a mission trip's going to be. It's amazing.
Yeah. So I get, you're just saying you need to go.
Yeah.
You need to go. I mean, if we could get every student to go at least at one in their high school career, that would be ideal. I think it would be transformative to our school culture and what happens. I think it's our parents and our people making it a priority. We do know, as Jean Ann said, it's a sacrifice. But so if you're listening, hopefully you've heard enough already on the importance of the command that Scripture gives us in Matthew in the Great Commission 28:19-20, where we're just commanded to go. We're told to go, but then the results over and over again and the benefits that it will bring to our community as a whole. But boy, I'll tell you, oftentimes my kids have been on mission. The child you get back is different, and they've been changed and transformed. And so if you're listening, there it is. This is God speaking to you, saying, "Yep, missions. we'll expect to see your kids' names on these future
Exactly. We're looking at
missions trips
exciting opportunities for the future, and so we hope that you guys will all come on board and come alongside and join us
all over. Yes, absolutely. So, Jean Ann, thank you. Sarah Neal, great to have you on. Praying for you as you head off into college. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And I want to thank you all for listening to another episode of From the Mount.